The story of giant sea reptiles begins not with their reign, but with the shadow of devastation. Nearly 252 million years ago, Earth endured the greatest mass extinction in its history, the Permian-Triassic extinction event. Sometimes called the Great Dying, this cataclysm wiped out around 90% of marine species and nearly 70% of life on land. The oceans, once full of trilobites, brachiopods, and a rich diversity of fish, became eerily silent. Coral reefs collapsed, food webs unraveled, and whole ecosystems vanished almost overnight in geological terms. Yet from this emptiness came opportunity. When ecosystems are shattered, niches lie vacant, waiting to be filled. And in the millions of years following the extinction, survivors and new lineages began to explore different ways of life. Some creatures stayed in the shallows, others ventured into deeper waters. Among the land reptiles, a few groups found themselves drawn back toward the sea. Over time, their descendants would adapt fully to aquatic life, giving rise to a remarkable chapter in Earth's history, the age of the marine reptiles. In the early Triassic, oceans were warm and strange. The supercontinent Pangaea still held most of Earth's landmass together, bordered by vast coastlines and shallow seas. With such immense stretches of coastal habitat, conditions favored experimentation. Small reptiles hunting along tidal flats found new opportunities in the shallow waters. At first, these were tentative steps. Lizards waiting for fish, reptiles chasing crustaceans in lagoons. But evolution rewards innovation. Over millions of years, certain reptiles became increasingly specialized for marine life. Their limbs flattened into paddles. Their bodies became streamlined. Their nostrils shifted position, allowing them to breathe more efficiently at the water's surface. With each adaptation, they moved farther from shore until the land became only a distant memory. Among the earliest of these pioneers were the ichthyosaurs, slender-bodied reptiles that looked something like a cross between a lizard and a seal. With long necks, sharp teeth, and paddle-like limbs, ichthyosaurs were well suited to chasing fish in shallow seas. Fossils of ichthyosaurs are often found in what were once coastal lagoons, suggesting they lived a semi-aquatic lifestyle, hauling out onto beaches, but spending much of their time swimming. They represent one of the first steps toward the fully aquatic life that later marine reptiles would embrace. Another group, the plesiosaurs, chose a different path. Instead of long, sleek bodies, plesiosaurs developed broad, stocky builds. Their teeth were blunt and flat, designed not for spearing fish, but for crushing hard shells. They prowled shallow sea floors in search of clams, mussels, and other shellfish. Some species evolved armor-like plates across their backs, making them resemble the turtles that would not appear until much later. In their own way, plesiosaurs show the incredible range of experimentation that early reptiles brought to the oceans. But of all the early Triassic marine reptiles, none would be as successful or as spectacular as the ichthyosaurs. Emerging around 250 million years ago, ichthyosaurs were among the first reptiles to become fully adapted to life in the open ocean. Their name means fish lizards, and their streamlined bodies indeed looked remarkably like those of modern dolphins or tunas. This similarity is a powerful example of convergent evolution, when unrelated creatures evolve similar forms to thrive in the same environment. The earliest ichthyosaurs were not yet the giants they would later become. They were modest in size, perhaps 1 or 2 meters long, with flexible bodies and long tails. But even in these early forms, the hallmarks of their future success were present. They gave birth to live young at sea, freeing them from the need to return to land. Their large eyes suggested keen vision for hunting in dim waters, and their sleek bodies allowed them to chase swift prey, making them some of the first true marine predators after the Permian extinction. As marine reptiles spread, they helped shape the recovering ecosystems of the Triassic seas. Ammonites, coiled-shelled relatives of squid, became abundant once again, providing a key food source for many predators. Fish diversified, filling open water and reef environments. Coral reefs began to re-establish themselves in some regions, though they were different from the coral reefs we know today. Marine reptiles were both hunters and hunted. Large predatory fish pursued them, while they in turn preyed upon fish, ammonites, and smaller reptiles. The balance of predator and prey returned, step by step, restoring the rhythms of ocean life. What made the early marine reptiles so successful was their adaptability. In the wake of the Permian extinction, ecosystems were unstable, climates were harsh, and resources were scattered. Yet different reptile groups found their own ways to survive. Nothosaurs in the shallows, placodonts among shellfish beds, ichthyosaurs in the open seas. This flexibility ensured that when one environment shifted or collapsed, others remained open to exploitation. And with time, these early experiments gave rise to ever more specialized and powerful forms. Ichthyosaurs would grow to the size of whales. Plesiosaurs with necks like serpents and jaws lined with teeth would appear. Crocodile-like reptiles would learn to swim the open seas. And in the Cretaceous, a new lineage, the mosasaurs, would emerge to dominate the oceans in spectacular fashion. By the end of the Triassic, Earth's oceans had been transformed. From the barren emptiness left by the Permian extinction, they had become thriving realms once more, filled with predators, prey, and entire communities of life. Marine reptiles were no longer tentative visitors to the sea. They were permanent residents, evolving into astonishing shapes and sizes, ready to rule the oceans for the next 180 million years. The story of the giant sea reptiles is a story of resilience, innovation, and transformation. It begins in the aftermath of catastrophe, but quickly becomes a saga of success. From the shallow coasts to the open oceans, reptiles had claimed the seas as their own. And this is only the beginning. The Triassic world was one of recovery, but also of experimentation. Life had been forced to reinvent itself in the wake of the Permian extinction, and nowhere was this more visible than in the oceans. The seas that had once been quiet and nearly lifeless were now alive again, filled with strange new forms. Among them, certain reptiles were beginning to rise above the rest. These were the first true rulers of the post-extinction oceans, creatures that would dominate marine ecosystems for tens of millions of years. By the Middle Triassic, ichthyosaurs had already begun to evolve into sleek, fast swimmers. Their bodies took on a more fish-like shape, rigid, streamlined torsos with crescent-shaped tails built for thrust. Their long jaws were lined with sharp conical teeth, perfect for catching slippery prey like fish and squid-like ammonites. Some ichthyosaurs reached impressive sizes, stretching 4 to 5 meters in length. They could dive deep, chasing prey into darker waters, guided by their enormous eyes. Fossilized eye sockets suggest that ichthyosaurs had some of the largest eyes of any vertebrate, rivaling even those of giant squids today. This adaptation would have given them an incredible advantage in the dimly lit depths of the Triassic seas. Unlike reptiles tied to the land, ichthyosaurs gave birth to live young in the water. Fossil evidence preserves remarkable snapshots of mothers in the act of giving birth. The tiny skeleton of a baby still halfway inside its mother's body. This adaptation freed ichthyosaurs from returning to shore, allowing them to live entirely at sea, much like whales do today. While ichthyosaurs roamed the open waters, nothosaurs remained closer to shore. With long, flexible necks and slender bodies, nothosaurs were adept at weaving between rocks and reefs, ambushing fish in shallow lagoons. Their paddle-like limbs suggest they were agile swimmers, though they likely still hauled themselves onto beaches at times, resting or perhaps laying eggs. Nothosaurs represent an intermediate stage in marine reptile evolution, not yet fully committed to the ocean like ichthyosaurs, but no longer bound to the land. Their long jaws bristled with sharp teeth, giving them the tools of a hunter, while their semi-aquatic lifestyle let them exploit a variety of environments. Over time, nothosaurs would give rise to one of the most iconic marine reptile groups of all, the plesiosaurs. But in the Triassic, they were still experimenting, adapting to the challenges of their environment in their own way. If ichthyosaurs were the sprinters and nothosaurs the ambushers, placodonts were the bulldozers of the Triassic seas. Stocky and slow, these reptiles specialized in a diet few others could manage. Their teeth were broad, flat, and reinforced for crushing, perfect for breaking the shells of clams, mussels, and crustaceans that littered the seafloor. Some placodonts developed heavy, armored bodies with thick plates covering their backs. In some species, these plates were so extensive that they made the animals look uncannily like turtles. But unlike turtles, placodonts had no shells from birth. Instead, their armor evolved independently as protection from predators. Though not as swift or fearsome as ichthyosaurs, placodonts filled an important niche. By consuming vast numbers of shelled animals, they helped regulate populations and recycle nutrients into the ecosystem. Together, these early marine reptiles began constructing the framework of Triassic food webs. At the base were plankton, algae, and tiny filter-feeding animals. Small fish and invertebrates fed on them. Larger fish, ammonites, and shelled mollusks made up the next layer. And above it all swam the marine reptiles. Ichthyosaurs chasing fish in the open sea. Nothosaurs weaving through shallows. Placodonts crushing mollusks on the seafloor. Predator-to-prey relationships became more complex, stabilizing ecosystems that had been empty after the extinction. Each group played its role: the speed of ichthyosaurs, the versatility of nothosaurs, the specialization of placodonts. This diversity was key to the resilience of Triassic oceans. Of course, life in the seas was not without conflict. Marine reptiles competed not only with one another, but also with large predatory fish that survived the extinction. Fossils of ancient sharks and bony fish suggest that they too were formidable hunters. Yet rather than being driven to extinction, reptiles adapted by occupying new niches. Ichthyosaurs became the swift hunters of the open sea, leaving reefs and coastlines to nothosaurs. Placodonts specialized in shellfish, avoiding direct competition with fast-moving predators. This partitioning of habitats and diets allowed multiple groups to thrive side by side. As the Triassic progressed, Earth's geography itself was shifting. Pangaea, though still largely intact, was beginning to crack along its seams. Vast rift valleys formed, opening up new coastlines and shallow seas. These environments provided fresh opportunities for marine reptiles to expand and diversify. Every new stretch of shoreline, every new lagoon or bay became a laboratory for evolution. Marine reptiles spread into these waters, adapting to conditions that favored speed, stealth, or strength. In this way, the Triassic seas became crucibles of innovation. By the late Triassic, the first plesiosaurs were appearing, descended from nothosaurs, but far more adapted to marine life. Ichthyosaurs had already grown into larger, more powerful forms, capable of ruling the open seas. Placodonts, while eventually fading, had shown the potential of armored, specialized feeders. The groundwork was laid for the next great stage of marine reptile history. Soon, oceans would be dominated not only by ichthyosaurs, but also by the long-necked plesiosaurs and short-necked pliosaurs. Apex predators, larger than anything yet seen in the sea, would emerge, reshaping ecosystems all over again. But in the Triassic, it was the pioneers, ichthyosaurs, nothosaurs, and placodonts, that first claimed the seas, proving that reptiles could not only survive in the oceans, but thrived there, becoming true rulers of their watery realms. The Triassic had been an age of recovery when reptiles cautiously tested the waters of Earth's oceans. By the dawn of the Jurassic, however, those experiments had blossomed into success. The seas teemed with reptiles of every shape and size, swift hunters, armored giants, and graceful swimmers, each perfectly adapted to the world they ruled. But it wasn't just the reptiles that were changing. The very shape of the earth was shifting beneath them. At the start of the Jurassic, the supercontinent Pangaea still dominated Earth's surface, but cracks were spreading through its foundations. Vast rift valleys split the land, and molten rock welled up to form new seafloor. Slowly, the single continent began to fragment, birthing the first outlines of the Atlantic Ocean. As the continents drifted apart, shallow seas expanded. These warm, sunlit waters became fertile grounds for life, offering countless new habitats for marine reptiles. Coral reefs flourished, ammonites multiplied in dazzling diversity, and schools of fish shimmered in the shallows. It was into this stage that the reptiles of the Jurassic entered, and they would rise to dominate as never before. One of the most iconic marine reptiles of all time, the plesiosaurs, reached their prime in the Jurassic. Descended from nothosaurs of the Triassic, plesiosaurs were now fully adapted to the ocean. Their bodies were stout and hydrodynamic, with 4 powerful flippers that worked in unison like wings, propelling them with grace and agility. There were 2 main types of plesiosaurs: long-necked plesiosaurs with dozens of vertebrae in their necks, giving them an almost serpentine appearance. They used their small heads and sharp teeth to dart after schools of fish, snatching prey with sudden strikes. Short-necked pliosaurs, in contrast, developed massive skulls filled with conical teeth. With necks shortened and jaws enlarged, they became the apex predators of the Jurassic seas, rivaling even the largest ichthyosaurs in power. Together, these groups established a dynasty that would last for more than 100 million years, spreading into every ocean on Earth. Though plesiosaurs were rising, the Jurassic seas still belonged in part to the ichthyosaurs. Sleek and streamlined, they had now evolved into some of the most specialized swimmers the oceans had ever seen. Some ichthyosaurs were enormous, growing up to 20 meters long, giants like Shonosaurus and Temnodontosaurus. Their massive bodies, combined with large eyes and swift tails, made them masters of the open sea. They hunted fish and squid in vast quantities, sometimes diving deep into the twilight zone of the ocean. Fossilized stomach contents reveal the diversity of their diets: fish bones, squid hooks, and even the remains of other reptiles. These giants were more than just fast swimmers. They were true top predators, shaping the food chains of Jurassic oceans. While ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs ruled open waters, another lineage of reptiles found its niche closer to shore: the marine crocodiles. metriohinchids. Unlike the modern crocodiles that haunt rivers and swamps, metriohinchids were fully adapted to the sea. Their limbs had transformed into flippers, their bodies streamlined, and their tails ended in fin-like structures that helped them slice through water. They were agile hunters, preying on fish and squid, and some even grew to lengths of 6 meters or more. Their skulls were long and narrow, lined with sharp teeth that interlocked like the jaws of modern gharials. Unlike ichthyosaurs, they still laid eggs on land, meaning they had to return to beaches to reproduce. Yet in the water, they were every bit as fearsome as their reptilian cousins. By the Middle Jurassic, the oceans were ecosystems of extraordinary complexity. Coral reefs stretched across shallow shelves, supporting a dazzling array of invertebrates. Ammonites, coiled relatives of modern squids, flourished in such abundance that their shells now serve as key markers in the rock record. Schools of fish darted through the reefs, while belemnites, squid-like animals with bullet-shaped shells, hovered in deeper waters. Above and beyond these creatures swam the reptiles. Plesiosaurs with necks like snakes glided among schools of fish. Pliosaurs patrolled as apex hunters. Ichthyosaurs coursed through the open sea, and marine crocodiles lurked near coastlines. Each filled a role, each part of a vast web of predator and prey that ensured no niche went unoccupied. With so many predators, competition was fierce. Ichthyosaurs pursued fish in open waters, but they had to watch for pliosaurs, whose massive jaws could easily crush them. Long-necked plesiosaurs fed delicately on small prey, but risked ambush from crocodiles or larger pliosaurs. Even the metriorinchids had rivals, often overlapping with smaller plesiosaurs near coastlines. Yet, in this balance of competition, stability was born. Each group carved out its place, specializing in ways that minimized direct conflict. Some went after massive prey, others focused on delicate fish or armored mollusks. This specialization allowed the Jurassic oceans to support an astonishing diversity of life. Just as life adapted, so too did the Earth itself continue to change. As continents drifted apart, new seaways opened. Currents shifted, carrying warm waters into cooler latitudes and altering the spread of life. The expansion of shallow seas created havens for biodiversity, but it also meant that ecosystems were vulnerable. Any shift in sea level could expose reefs or alter coastlines, sending ripples through the balance of life. The Jurassic seas were vibrant and full, but they were also dynamic, always shifting with the slow heartbeat of the planet. By the late Jurassic, the stage was set for some of the greatest marine reptiles to ever live. Pliosaurs with skulls, as long as a human is tall, prowled the oceans. Ichthyosaurs had reached their evolutionary zenith, and plesiosaurs had spread across every corner of the seas. It was a golden age for marine reptiles. a time when they not only ruled the oceans, but shaped them, driving the evolution of prey and predator alike. But change was always on the horizon. The Jurassic seas were full of giants, yet in the Cretaceous, new contenders would arise. Some groups would fade, others would rise to new heights, and the balance of power beneath the waves would shift once again. The Jurassic seas were alive with diversity, but towering above this tapestry of life were the giants. These were the apex hunters, reptiles that dwarfed almost every other creature, ruling with speed, strength, and size. Their shadows fell long across the oceans, reminders that in this world of abundance, survival still hinged on power. Among the most formidable hunters were the pliosaurs, short-necked cousins of plesiosaurs. Their evolution had taken a decisive turn. Instead of long, delicate necks for precision strikes, pliosaurs developed enormous skulls and thick, muscular bodies built for strength. The most famous of these titans was Liopleurodon. Estimates of its size vary, but some individuals may have stretched 7 to 10 meters long, with a skull over 2 meters in length. Its jaws were armed with teeth like daggers, capable of crushing bones and tearing through the armor of even large prey. Fossil evidence suggests pliosaurs were ambush predators. They lurked in deeper waters, using bursts of speed from their powerful flippers to lunge at passing ichthyosaurs or long-necked plesiosaurs. Once they seized their prey, few creatures could escape the bone-crushing grip of their jaws. Their role as apex predators placed them at the top of the Jurassic food chain, feared and respected by all. While pliosaurs dominated coastal and mid-depth waters, the open seas belonged to ichthyosaurs. By the middle to late Jurassic, some ichthyosaurs had reached truly colossal proportions. Species like Temnodontosaurus and Shonisaurus grew over 15 meters long, longer than a city bus. Their sleek, dolphin-like bodies made them swift and efficient swimmers, capable of covering vast distances across the open ocean. These giants were not solitary hunters. Fossil evidence suggests ichthyosaurs may have traveled in groups, hunting shoals of fish and squid, much like modern dolphins or whales. Their massive eyes, the largest of any known animal, allowed them to see in the dim light of deep water, giving them access to prey far below the reach of other reptiles. Unlike pliosaurs, ichthyosaurs often relied on speed rather than brute force. They could chase down prey across long stretches of ocean, wearing it down until capture was inevitable. Though they both occupied the role of top predators, pliosaurs and ichthyosaurs employed strikingly different strategies. Pliosaurs were ambushers. Their powerful builds allowed them to deliver sudden, devastating attacks. A pliosaur might strike from below or the side, using surprise and raw strength to end a hunt quickly. Ichthyosaurs were pursuit hunters. They relied on endurance and speed, chasing schools of fish or cephalopods for long distances. Their large eyes and hydrodynamic forms made them unmatched in open waters. The coexistence of these giants was possible because they rarely overlapped in hunting style. Where pliosaurs prowled coasts and mid-depth seas, ichthyosaurs ranged freely across the deep, both ruling their respective domains. Despite their size and strength, even the greatest marine reptiles faced competition. Large pliosaurs likely preyed on smaller ichthyosaurs, while ichthyosaurs in turn may have hunted juvenile plesiosaurs or crocodiles. Marine crocodiles, though smaller, sometimes scavenged the kills of larger hunters, slipping in to steal scraps. The seas were a constant battlefield of strategy and survival. Apex predators controlled territory. Prey species evolved defenses, and balance shifted with every new generation. This ongoing struggle fueled the incredible diversity of life that marked the Jurassic. Fossils provide glimpses into the violent world of Jurassic oceans. Some ichthyosaur bones bear the marks of pliosaur teeth, deep gouges left by powerful jaws. Plesiosaur skeletons show crushed ribs and broken necks, wounds likely delivered by ambush predators. In one famous case, a fossilized ichthyosaur was discovered with the remains of another reptile in its stomach, proving that even giants were prey to larger rivals. These fossils remind us that beneath the calm surface of ancient seas, brutal battles determined who lived and who perished. By the late Jurassic, the balance of power in the oceans was clear. Pliosaurs dominated nearshore and mid-level environments. Ichthyosaurs reigned in the open seas, and plesiosaurs filled the gaps between. It was a golden age of marine reptile dominance, with each group thriving in its own ecological niche. But this balance was not permanent. As the Jurassic gave way to the Cretaceous, shifting climates and changing seas would alter the fate of these giants. Some would rise higher still, while others would vanish forever. The Jurassic seas were not isolated realms. They connected constantly with the coasts, estuaries, lagoons, and shallow bays where land, air, and water converged. Here, marine reptiles shared their world with pterosaurs, early birds, amphibians, and shoreline dinosaurs. It was in these margins, neither fully sea nor fully land, that ecosystems were at their most diverse, with constant exchange of energy, prey, and predators. Along the coastlines of the Jurassic, life was in constant motion. Pterosaurs wheeled overhead, scanning the water for fish. Their wings, stretched between elongated fingers, carried them across vast distances, allowing them to skim the waves or dive into shallow pools. Some, like Rhamphorhynchus, had long tails with diamond-shaped tips, using them for balance as they swooped over the surf. Others, like Pterodactylus, sported shorter tails and more refined wings, hinting at the evolutionary direction that would later lead to the largest flying animals ever. On the ground, primitive crocodile relatives lurked near the edges of rivers and lagoons, slipping into the water at the first scent of prey. These crocodiles were not the squat ambush hunters of today. Some were fully marine, adapted with paddle-like limbs and tails designed for speed. They pursued fish and smaller reptiles in the same shallow waters where plesiosaurs glided, and in the background, forests of conifers and cycads bordered the coasts, their roots holding back sediment that washed into the sea. These plants provided shelter and nesting grounds for both reptiles and early mammals that cautiously crept along the edges of the wilderness. Plesiosaurs and pliosaurs were often sighted in these shallow, near-shore environments. Fossil sites reveal bones clustered in coastal deposits, suggesting these predators frequently hunted along the continental shelves where prey was plentiful. Fish, squid-like cephalopods, and juvenile marine reptiles gathered in shallow water, irresistible hunting grounds for larger carnivores. Ichthyosaurs, though more at home in open seas, occasionally ventured into coastal regions, especially when following shoals of fish. Their speed and agility gave them an advantage in both deep water and nearshore habitats, though they were more vulnerable to ambush by pliosaurs in the tighter spaces of bays and lagoons. Shorelines often became stages for frenzied hunts. A shoal of fish, chased by ichthyosaurs or pliosaurs, might be driven into shallow waters. There, pterosaurs swooped down, snatching fish that leapt clear of the surface, while crocodiles lunged from the edges. The entire shoreline could erupt in a chaotic exchange of predators, each capitalizing on the panic of prey. These scenes were echoes of what still plays out today, when seabirds, sharks, and dolphins herd schools of fish toward coasts. The principle was the same. Predators used the environment itself to trap their quarry. The skies above Jurassic seas were as alive as the waters beneath them. Pterosaurs had evolved into a variety of shapes and sizes, some no bigger than crows, others with wingspans exceeding 3 meters. Their feeding techniques were diverse. Some skimmed the surface, snapping up small fish with needle-like teeth. Others perched along rocky cliffs, launching into flight to dive upon unsuspecting prey. A few may have even hunted in groups, circling schools of fish like seabirds do today. Fossilized stomach contents reveal fish bones within their bellies, proving that the coasts and shallow waters were central to their survival. Beaches and sandbars provided critical nesting grounds. Both marine reptiles and pterosaurs are believed to have used coastal areas for reproduction. Just as modern sea turtles return to beaches to lay their eggs, ancient reptiles may have crawled ashore to bury their clutches in warm sand. Fossilized nests and eggs from related species suggest that juvenile reptiles faced extreme danger immediately after hatching. Many would have been snatched up by predators long before they reached the safety of deeper water. The cycle of life at the coast was unforgiving, ensuring that only a small fraction of young survived into adulthood. The meeting of sea and shore was a symphony of constant interactions. Marine reptiles relied on coasts for hunting and reproduction. Pterosaurs relied on coasts for fishing and nesting. Crocodiles thrived at the margins, straddling both water and land. Even land-dwelling dinosaurs occasionally wandered onto beaches, leaving behind fossilized footprints preserved in ancient sandstones. The Jurassic coastline was not just a boundary, it was a crucible of evolution where species tested adaptations, clashed for resources, and gave rise to new forms of life. By the late Jurassic, continental drift was widening the oceans. New shallow seas formed as Pangaea split, increasing coastal habitats dramatically. These environments created opportunities for marine reptiles and pterosaurs alike to diversify, multiplying into dozens of species that filled every ecological role imaginable. But with this expansion came new challenges. Competition intensified, predators grew larger and more specialized, and prey species evolved to keep pace. The coasts remained dynamic, restless zones, places where survival meant constant innovation. The dawn of the Cretaceous period marked a turning point in Earth's history. The age of reptiles continued, but the balance of power within the oceans began to shift. Where once ichthyosaurs and giant pliosaurs had dominated, new conditions would challenge their supremacy, paving the way for fresh adaptations and entirely new predators. The continents were no longer bound tightly together as in the Triassic and early Jurassic. By the early Cretaceous, Pangaea had fractured further, giving rise to expanding oceans such as the Atlantic. Shallow inland seas flooded low-lying regions, creating warm, nutrient-rich waters teeming with life. This continental drift reshaped marine ecosystems. More coastlines meant more shallow habitats, and with them came flourishing reefs, lagoons, and estuaries. These environments supported diverse food webs, from tiny plankton to massive predators. At the same time, the climate was warm and humid, with high sea levels. Oxygen levels in the oceans fluctuated, creating both rich feeding zones and deadly oxygen-poor dead zones that challenged marine survival. For millions of years, ichthyosaurs had ruled the open seas. Their streamlined, dolphin-like bodies made them icons of speed and efficiency. But in the early Cretaceous, their dominance began to wane. Fossil evidence suggests ichthyosaurs faced increasing competition. Sharks and large bony fish diversified, eating into their food supply. At the same time, pliosaurs and newly evolving predators began targeting ichthyosaurs themselves. Some ichthyosaurs adapted by becoming smaller and more specialized, preying on squid or fish in specific habitats. Yet their diversity shrank over time, and by the Middle Cretaceous, only a few species remained. Their decline was gradual but steady, a reminder that even the most successful lineages eventually face challenges they cannot overcome. While ichthyosaurs struggled, the pliosaurs flourished. These short-necked plesiosaurs grew into some of the largest marine predators the world had ever seen. One of the most fearsome was Cretaceous, a pliosaur stretching over 10 meters long, with a skull nearly 3 meters in length. Its jaws were lined with massive conical teeth, designed not for slicing, but for gripping and crushing. A single bite could shatter the bones of its prey, from large fish to other marine reptiles. Pliosaurs dominated coastal and mid-ocean environments. Their hunting style, ambushes powered by sudden bursts of speed, made them deadly to almost anything in their path. Fossils of marine reptiles bearing tooth marks suggest pliosaurs did not hesitate to attack other large predators, including their plesiosaur relatives. In contrast to pliosaurs, long-necked plesiosaurs thrived in gentler rolls. With necks stretching up to 7 meters, they were adapted for stealthy fishing. By sweeping their necks side to side, they could dart their heads into schools of fish or squid, striking with speed and precision. The long-necked plesiosaurs avoided direct competition with pliosaurs by occupying different niches. While pliosaurs hunted large, powerful prey, long-necked plesiosaurs fed on smaller animals in shallower waters. This division of roles allowed both groups to coexist in the same seas without directly overlapping. One of the most transformative features of the early Cretaceous seas was the expansion of coral reefs. Warm, shallow waters created perfect conditions for reef growth, building vast underwater cities teeming with life. These reefs became hubs of biodiversity. Fish, crustaceans, mollusks, and small reptiles flourished among the corals, providing an endless buffet for larger predators. Pterosaurs and early seabirds hunted along the coasts, while marine crocodiles patrolled the margins. The rise of reefs also offered refuge for prey species. Small fish could dart among coral branches to escape larger hunters, creating an evolutionary arms race that drove predators to become more agile and cunning. Though primarily a land-based phenomenon, the emergence of flowering plants in the early Cretaceous indirectly influenced the seas. These plants stabilized soils, reducing sediment runoff into coastal waters, which in turn created clearer seas, ideal for reef development. The spread of flowering plants also reshaped food webs on land, fueling new insect pollinators and providing new food sources for herbivorous dinosaurs. This cascading effect eventually extended to the seas, as nutrient cycles between land and ocean became more complex. During the early Cretaceous, metriohinged marine crocodiles reached their peak. Unlike modern crocodiles, these reptiles were fully adapted to life at sea. They had paddle-like limbs, streamlined bodies, and tails built for propulsion. Their nostrils were shifted toward the top of their snouts, allowing them to breathe while mostly submerged. Some species grew to 6 meters or more and were capable hunters, preying on fish, squid, and even small marine reptiles. Yet despite their success, they too faced growing competition from pliosaurs and, later, mosasaurs. The early Cretaceous oceans were bustling with change. Ammonites, the coiled-shelled relatives of squid, were abundant, providing food for both reptiles and fish. Bony fish diversified, while sharks expanded into new ecological roles. This constant expansion and adaptation made the seas dynamic and unpredictable. Predators and prey alike had to evolve quickly or risk being left behind. The early Cretaceous was a period of transition, a time when ancient lineages like ichthyosaurs began to fade, while new predators like giant pliosaurs rose to dominance. It was also an age of ecological innovation, with coral reefs, flowering plants, and expanding coastlines reshaping life at every level. The balance of power in the oceans was shifting, setting the stage for even greater transformations to come. For lurking just beyond the horizon were new reptiles that would rise to claim the seas, the mosasaurs, destined to become the undisputed rulers of the Cretaceous oceans. The oceans of the mid-Cretaceous were vast, warm, and full of life. The stage was set for giants, predators of unimaginable size and power, to battle for dominance. The early Cretaceous had already seen the rise of pliosaurs and the decline of ichthyosaurs. Now, those who survived would face competition from new challenges, while prey species grew more diverse and plentiful. The Cretaceous seas were unlike those of earlier ages. Continental drift had opened up new oceans, including a widening Atlantic. Shallow inland seas spread across continents, creating warm, nutrient-rich waters. These conditions fueled explosions of marine life, from plankton at the base of the food chain to predators at the top. Every niche was filled. Ammonites and belemnites swirled in the mid-waters. Schools of fish darted across coral reefs, and giant turtles and reptiles cruised above deep ocean shelves. But above all, it was the apex predators that defined this world. Massive reptiles with toothy jaws, streamlined bodies, and hunting strategies as refined as any modern shark or orca. By the Middle Cretaceous, pliosaurs remained among the deadliest hunters in the seas. With barrel-like bodies and immense heads, they were built for brute strength. Their jaws could crush the bones of prey, and their 4 powerful flippers allowed bursts of speed unmatched by most marine reptiles. Species like Kronosaurus reached lengths of 10 to 12 meters, making them true sea monsters. Fossilized stomach contents suggest they preyed on fish, turtles, and even other marine reptiles. Some specimens show bite marks from rivals, evidence of violent battles between pliosaurs themselves. Despite their size, pliosaurs were not invincible. Their hunting style required large prey, and as ecosystems shifted, so did their fortunes. Still, during their peak, few creatures could rival them as apex hunters. The mid-Cretaceous also saw the expansion of sharks. Though smaller than today's giants, these ancient sharks diversified into many forms, from sleek hunters of open water to bottom feeders. Some reached lengths of 6 meters or more, preying on fish and squid, but also scavenging on reptile carcasses. Shark teeth are among the most common fossils from this time, scattered across ancient seabeds in vast numbers. Sharks were opportunists, fast and highly adaptable. While pliosaurs and crocodiles were powerful specialists, sharks thrived by being versatile, filling niches across the seas. Alongside pliosaurs, the seas were patrolled by metrial-hinged marine crocodiles. Unlike their modern relatives, these were fully adapted to life at sea. Their tails ended in powerful flukes, their limbs evolved into paddles, and their bodies were streamlined for efficient swimming. Some species grew over 6 meters long and were agile hunters, preying on fish, ammonites, and smaller reptiles. Their skulls were long and narrow, filled with sharp teeth perfect for gripping slippery prey. Marine crocodiles were fierce competitors, often hunting in the same environments as plesiosaurs and sharks. Fossil evidence suggests they sometimes clashed with other predators, competing for territory and prey. Even as pliosaurs reigned supreme, long-necked plesiosaurs maintained their place in the food web. These elegant reptiles thrived in shallower waters, sweeping their long necks through schools of fish or squid. Though vulnerable to larger predators, their agility and reach gave them an advantage in reef environments and lagoons, where their preferred prey gathered in abundance. Fossils reveal a wide variety of neck lengths and body shapes, suggesting that plesiosaurs diversified to exploit different food sources. Some had shorter, sturdier necks, while others developed necks so long that they became like living fishing rods. The mid-Cretaceous seas teemed with ammonites, shelled cephalopods related to squid and octopuses. They spiraled through the waters in countless numbers, making them a cornerstone of the marine food chain. Alongside them were belemnites, another group of squid-like animals with bullet-shaped internal shells. Together, ammonites and belemnites provided an endless food source for predators of all sizes. These creatures also played a key role in ocean ecology, cycling nutrients and serving as indicators of environmental shifts. Their fossils today are some of the most abundant and beautiful remnants of the Cretaceous oceans. Not all reptiles in the seas were predators. Giant turtles flourished, some growing over 3 meters long. Their shells protected them from most attackers, though even they sometimes fell victim to pliosaurs or crocodiles. Other reptiles, including marine lizards and early relatives of mosasaurs, began experimenting with ocean life. Though not yet dominant, these small lizards hinted at the future rulers of the seas. The Cretaceous seas were defined by balance, a constant struggle between predator and prey. Pliosaurs hunted the largest creatures, Sharks patrolled mid-level waters, crocodiles stalked coastal zones, and plesiosaurs fished in reefs and lagoons. It was a layered web of giants, each playing a role in keeping the system in balance. Yet beneath this stability, change was brewing. Evolution never rests, and a new group of reptiles was preparing to take center stage. By the later Cretaceous, pliosaurs would begin to fade, and even marine crocodiles would struggle against growing competition. Rising from the lineage of land-dwelling lizards came a new predator, one destined to surpass them all. These were the mosasaurs, reptiles that would soon seize control of the oceans and dominate until the very end of the age of reptiles. But before their rise, the mid-Cretaceous seas belonged to the apex hunters. The pliosaurs, the sharks, and the crocodiles that carved their legacy into Earth's history. The oceans of the Mesozoic were not silent. They pulsed with life, filled with movement, colour, and sound. Though much of that sound was beyond the human ear. As the continents shifted and seas expanded, entire worlds of biodiversity flourished below the surface. The marine reptiles that dominated these waters, plesiosaurs, pliosaurs, ichthyosaurs in earlier times, and, by the late Cretaceous, mosasaurs, were not solitary actors. They lived within immense ecosystems, teeming with organisms great and small, their fates intertwined in cycles of survival, adaptation, and extinction. This chapter slows down from the great battles of predators and prey to instead linger within these worlds. We drift alongside the marine reptiles, observing the rhythms of their daily existence, their migrations, their hunts, and their family lives. Here, beneath the waves, the story of Earth becomes intimate, detailed, and filled with the hum of survival. One of the most astonishing aspects of marine reptile life was their scale of movement. Many species were not confined to a single stretch of coastline or shallow sea. Like whales today, they may have migrated across entire oceans. Fossil evidence hints at such movements. Ichthyosaurs found in what were once tropical seas, plesiosaurs appearing in fossil beds across continents, and mosasaurs thriving from Europe to North America to Africa. Migration would not have been aimless wandering. It was a response to cycles of climate, prey availability, and reproduction. During warm seasons, rich upwellings of nutrients may have drawn enormous swarms of fish, ammonites, and squid. Marine reptiles would follow these blooms, much as sharks and whales follow plankton and sardine runs today. When seas cooled or prey grew scarce, they might retreat to sheltered coastal zones or deeper waters where food remained more reliable. Imagine the sight: a pod of long-necked plesiosaurs gliding in formation, their heads rising and dipping as they scanned for prey. Juveniles swam close to their mothers, sheltered in the slipstream of larger bodies, conserving energy as they made journeys spanning hundreds or even thousands of kilometers. Above them, Pterosaurs traced their movements, diving to snatch fish stirred up by the migrating reptiles. These migrations knitted together the Mesozoic seas into vast highways of life, uniting distant coasts and shaping entire ecosystems. Marine reptiles were not passive drifters. Their lives revolved around finding food, sometimes delicately, sometimes violently. Plesiosaurs, with their small heads and long necks, likely specialized in precision strikes. They could snake their necks into schools of fish, snapping up prey with quick, darting motions. Their peg-like teeth were adapted for gripping slippery creatures rather than slicing flesh, suggesting a diet of fish and squid. Pliosaurs, in contrast, were blunt instruments of power. With massive jaws, short necks, and a bite comparable to Tyrannosaurus rex, they tackled larger prey. Other reptiles, giant fish, and even young plesiosaurs. Their skulls were streamlined, built for ambush attacks in open water. Ichthyosaurs, with their tuna-like bodies and enormous eyes, hunted like dolphins or swordfish. Some species probably rammed into schools of fish at high speed, stunning them before swallowing mouthfuls at once. Others may have hunted at depth, using their sensitive eyes to track glowing prey in the dim twilight zone. Mosasaurs, the final lords of the Cretaceous oceans, were opportunists. Some species had robust teeth for crushing ammonites and turtles. Others had sharp, blade-like teeth for slicing through flesh. Evidence from stomach contents shows they ate fish, squid, birds, and even other mosasaurs. They were versatile, relentless, and perfectly adapted for domination. Each strategy shaped not only the hunters, but also the hunted. Fish evolved speed and agility. Ammonites developed thicker shells or elaborate spines. Squid-like belemnites grew faster and reproduced prolifically. Predators and prey were locked in an evolutionary dance, pushing each other to new extremes. Were marine reptiles social? Fossil evidence suggests the answer may be yes, at least in some cases. Bone beds containing multiple ichthyosaurs hint at group behavior, perhaps pods, much like whales and dolphins today. Some plesiosaur fossils show adults and juveniles together, suggesting parental care. Even mosasaurs, long thought to be solitary, may have engaged in social hunting or at least tolerated the presence of others in feeding zones. If so, their societies would have added richness to life beneath the waves. Imagine a plesiosaur nursery in a warm, shallow bay. Mothers circling protectively as hatchlings tested their flippers. Juvenile ichthyosaurs racing each other in bursts of speed, honing their reflexes against small schools of fish. Mosasaurs, less tender, might have competed for dominance within territories, their clashes leaving scars on skulls and flippers. Sociality also brought communication. While we cannot know their exact sounds, it is likely that marine reptiles used body language, tail flicks, bubble trails, or jaw snaps as signals. Some may even have produced deep, resonant calls carried through the water, the echoes marking territory or summoning mates. Living in the sea posed challenges for reproduction. Unlike turtles, which return to land to lay eggs, most marine reptiles gave birth to live young. Fossilized ichthyosaur embryos provide direct evidence of this, showing tiny replicas curled within the mother's skeleton. Plesiosaurs and mosasaurs also likely bore live young, a strategy that freed them from the vulnerability of nesting on shore. Giving birth in sheltered bays or shallow waters would have offered protection from predators, while still allowing young to quickly swim and feed. The survival of offspring was precarious. Juveniles were smaller, slower, and more vulnerable, targeted by sharks, larger reptiles, and even predatory fish. Many would not survive their first year, but those that did grew rapidly, joining the ranks of the hunters and continuing the cycle. Life beneath the waves was not only about predator and prey, it was about balance, cooperation, and rhythm. Cleaning fish may have darted between the teeth of resting reptiles, picking off parasites and scraps of food. Scavengers like small sharks and fish trailed after mosasaurs, snatching leftovers from their kills. Ammonites swarmed in vast numbers, their shells providing shelter for algae and tiny crustaceans. Daily rhythms pulsed through these oceans. By day, reptiles hunted in shallows or near the surface where light attracted prey. By night, they followed migrations of squid and plankton into deeper waters. The seas glowed faintly with bioluminescence, schools of tiny creatures lighting up as they fled from predators. Each day, each night, was a cycle of hunger, pursuit, rest, and renewal. When we pull back from the individual creatures, what emerges is a vast web. Marine reptiles were not isolated giants. They were nodes within a complex, interconnected system. The collapse of one population could ripple outward, altering the balance of the seas. If ammonites dwindled, plesiosaurs suffered. If mosasaurs overhunted fish, sharks and birds would also feel the scarcity. Nutrients from coastal rivers fueled plankton blooms, which fed fish, which fed reptiles, which, in turn, nourished scavengers when they died. This interdependence made the Mesozoic oceans resilient, yet also fragile. They were vibrant, dynamic, endlessly creative, but vulnerable to sudden change. Close your eyes and drift beneath the surface of those ancient seas. Schools of fish glitter in shifting light. A plesiosaur rises silently beneath them, its neck weaving, jaws snapping. Far above, a pterosaur skims the waves, its wingtips trailing silver ripples. In the distance, the shadow of a mosasaur passes, immense and steady, its tail sweeping with power. The ocean hums with life, every niche filled, every rhythm sustained by countless creatures moving in balance. This was the daily reality of the world when giant sea reptiles ruled. A living, breathing ocean, forever in motion, forever alive. The oceans of the late Cretaceous were vast kingdoms of predators, prey, and uncountable tiny creatures. For over 150 million years, marine reptiles had dominated the seas, shaping ecosystems, outcompeting rivals, and evolving into some of the most extraordinary predators Earth had ever seen. Yet, like all great dynasties, their reign was not eternal. By the end of the Cretaceous, a combination of environmental changes, ecological pressures, and catastrophic events would bring their era to a close. By the late Cretaceous, the seas had shifted dramatically. Rising continents, fluctuating sea levels, and changing climate created new habitats while reducing others. Marine reptiles that once ruled shallow seas were now forced to adapt to expanding deep waters, shifting coastlines, and new competitors. The mosasaurs had become the dominant marine reptiles. They were versatile, powerful, and aggressive, capable of preying on fish, squid, turtles, and even smaller marine reptiles. Yet even they faced challenges. Sharks were evolving faster and diversifying, carving into food webs that mosasaurs had once monopolized. Long-necked plesiosaurs, though fewer in number, survived by specializing in particular niches. Even the giants of the past, pliosaurs, had mostly vanished. Their extinction was likely caused by changing prey distributions and competition from mosasaurs, leaving the seas increasingly dominated by fewer predator types. The late Cretaceous oceans were not only shaped by predators, but also by climate and ocean chemistry. Fluctuating temperatures, shifts in salinity, and periodic drops in oxygen created dead zones where few organisms could survive. These challenges disproportionately affected large marine reptiles, which required stable, oxygen-rich waters to hunt and grow. At the same time, prey species were evolving. Fish and cephalopods developed new defensive adaptations, including thicker shells, faster swimming abilities, and evasive behaviors. These subtle changes placed further pressure on marine reptiles, forcing them to hunt smarter, faster, and over greater ranges. Despite these challenges, mosasaurs ruled the oceans with unprecedented efficiency. These lizard-descended predators ranged from 5 to over 15 meters in length, with streamlined bodies, powerful tails, and jaws filled with cutting teeth. They were apex predators, capable of hunting almost anything in their environment. Fossil evidence suggests mosasaurs were also social hunters in some cases, perhaps collaborating to trap large prey. Some species specialized in crushing shells, while others targeted agile fish or other reptiles. They filled ecological roles once occupied by ichthyosaurs and pliosaurs, becoming the undisputed rulers of the seas. Even the mightiest predators were not immune to the cataclysm that struck at the end of the Cretaceous. Approximately 66 million years ago, an asteroid impact off the coast of what is now Mexico sent shockwaves through the planet. This event triggered massive tsunamis, forest fires, and a sudden, dramatic cooling of the climate. The oceans were thrown into chaos. Food chains collapsed as phytoplankton, the foundation of marine ecosystems, dwindled. Plankton eating fish and squid vanished, and with them, the predators that relied on them. Marine reptiles, already vulnerable due to ecological pressures, could not survive these sudden changes. Fossil evidence shows that many mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, and other marine reptiles disappeared from the record abruptly. Their reign, which had lasted for millions of years, came to a dramatic end. Though the marine reptiles vanished, their influence on Earth's oceans was lasting. They shaped the evolution of prey species, created niches that would later be filled by sharks, whales, and other modern predators, and left behind fossilized skeletons that continue to reveal the complexity of ancient marine life. Their bones, teeth, and even trackways record the story of life in the Mesozoic oceans, a tale of power, adaptation, and survival. In many ways, they were the first true titans of the seas, the original masters of a world now ruled by mammals. Imagine the oceans millions of years ago, the water teeming with life, from glowing plankton to schools of fish, from elegant plesiosaurs weaving through coral reefs to massive mosasaurs hunting with calculated precision. The world was brutal yet beautiful, a delicate balance of predator and prey. Each species played a role, from the smallest squid to the largest pliosaur. They were part of a system that evolved over hundreds of millions of years, responding to shifting continents, changing climates, and endless evolutionary pressures. Though the marine reptiles are gone, their story remains etched in the rocks and fossils, a reminder of Earth's dynamism, resilience, and the ever-changing nature of life. Their reign may have ended, but their legacy persists in the oceans they once ruled. The age of giant sea reptiles teaches us about adaptation, dominance, and extinction. It reminds us that even the most powerful creatures are subject to the forces of nature, and that life, in its endless creativity, continues to evolve and fill new niches. From the swift ichthyosaurs to the massive pliosaurs, the elegant long-necked plesiosaurs to the apex mosasaurs, the Mesozoic seas were a theatre of life unlike any other. Their story is one of triumph, struggle, and ultimate disappearance, a window into a world that existed long before humans, yet shaped the oceans in ways that resonate to this day. As we drift back to the present, the memory of these giants remains. Their skeletons whisper of a time when the seas were ruled by titans, and their story continues to inspire curiosity, wonder, and awe for the mysteries of Earth's past.